So good evening, colleagues, friends. So on behalf of the Lurie Institute for Disability Policy, I'd like to warmly welcome you to tonight's amazing event on accessing reproductive justice using intersectional self, systems, and community advocacy to create inclusive sexual and reproductive healthcare and expression. Thank you all for coming in person, and also thank you for those who've joined us online. My name is Monica Mitra. I direct the Lurie Institute for Disability Policy here at the Heller School for Social Policy and Management at Brandeis. And I'm also the Nancy Lurie Marks Professor of Disability Policy here. So we're absolutely delighted to host the second Carrie Buck Distinguished Fellowship lecture. And this lecture, this discussion first started with our inaugural 2023 fellow, Laurie Bertram Roberts, and continues tonight with our absolutely amazing, stellar 2024, Robin Wilson-Beattie. So this lecture will take the form of a conversation between Robin and Rebecca Cokley, the program officer for the Ford Foundation's first ever US Disability Rights Program. And we are grateful to the Ford Foundation for funding this fellowship, and to our amazing advisory board, Heather Watkins, Colleen Flanagan, Moreneke Giwa Unaiwu, and Laurie Bertram Roberts. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration and insight in selecting this year's fabulous Carrie Buck Fellow. I'd also like to thank our Lurie team, particularly Wendy Cleverell-Conti, Amy Abushanab, and of course, Nicole Lomerson, really thank you for making this event possible, successful, and perfect. So I'm sure many of you are wondering how and why we launched the Carrie Buck Distinguished Fellowship. And I'm going to leave the why to Robin and Rebecca, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about the how. So about 3 years ago, I'm going to say almost exactly 3 years ago, in March 2021, during a Brandeis event in which we were honoring Rebecca Cokley, who was awarded the Richmond Distinguished Fellow, at the end of the lecture, she was posed a question. And the response has led directly to the foundation and the creation of the Carrie Buck Fellowship. And the question was, Justice Louis Brandeis sided with the Supreme Court majority in upholding Buck v. Bell. Can you comment on what the university can or should do to acknowledge this and to commit to disability justice? Well, Rebecca's response, as is always the case, was swift and forceful. She suggested that Brandeis host a lecture that would start a conversation about Buck v. Bell and about the radicalness of the idea of disabled people being parents and having the right to parent. So, and now here we are celebrating and honoring the second Carrie Buck Distinguished Fellow. But before we begin, I'd like to give an introduction to Robin and to Rebecca. So Robin Wilson-Beattie is a speaker, a writer, an educator, and a passionate advocate at the intersection of sexuality and disability. With her insights into the intersection of disability, sexuality, healthcare, design, and identity, she challenges norms and encourages individuals to recognize and embrace their unique sexual expressions. She is a much sought-after speaker, engaging audience through her keynotes, her panels, workshops, webinars, at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, the University of Colorado Medical System, the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, and many other institutions. Her work has also been published in several international literary and social science journals. And in 2022, Robin spoke at the White House Roundtable on Disability and Reproductive Rights, attended and hosted by Vice President Harris. And Rebecca Cokley is the program officer for the Ford Foundation's first ever disability rights program, which is focused on strengthening the field, building the pipeline of diverse leadership, promoting disability pride, and mobilizing resources towards disability rights work. She also serves as the foundation's liaison to the President's Council for Disability Inclusion in Philanthropy. And in 2020, she was awarded Brandeis University's Richmond Distinguished Fellow. Rebecca has also stewarded a campaign that has resulted in unprecedented 12 presidential candidates, and hopefully more, developing disability policy platforms. She's a 3-time presidential appointee, and she has served in key policy roles at the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services. So 3 years ago, we began to imagine a conversation on the legacy of Buckley Bell, its connection to Brandeis, and how to change that legacy. And tonight we continue this conversation between Robin and Rebecca, 2 disabled women who are parents, who are now fighters in the fight for disability rights and justice. But this conversation includes all of us. Because in the words of Judy Heumann, when other people see you as a third-class citizen, the first thing you need to do is believe in yourself and the knowledge that you have rights. The next thing you need is a group of friends to fight back with. We are those friends, and we are that community. Thank you.
Hey, Robin.
Hello, Rebecca.
I was about to say, we're distinguished now. Isn't that fancy?
That's leadership.
That's so awesome. I wanted to start off by welcoming all the disabled folks in the room. Whether or not it is safe for you to self-identify publicly, privately, professionally, it's important that you're here and we see you. We are thankful for you, and our movement is infinitely strengthened by your presence. To quote Vilissa Thompson, you don't get to liberation and freedom without Black disabled people. So I think we would be remiss, given it is, after all, March 7th, if we didn't recognize the contributions of Black disabled women. Specifically shouting out our dear friend Heather Watkins in the front row, Dr. Sammy Schalk, Vilissa Thompson, Kia Brown, Dr. Subiniana Ama, Candace Coleman, Brittany Wilson, Carmen Jones, Claudia Gordon, Taryn Williams, Anita Cameron, and Kara Reedy, as well as acknowledging Black disabled women elders like Sylvia Walker, Johnny Lacey, Dr. Geraldine Hawkins, Lois Curtis, Fannie Lou Hamer, Octavia Butler, and Haidia Broadbent. Black disabled women and their leadership is the cornerstone of both the disability rights and the disability justice movement. And I dare anyone to challenge me, I will take you down today. Heather knows I will. Last year's recipient of the Carrie Buck Fellowship was our dear friend Lurie Bertram Roberts. And I couldn't imagine anybody more fitting to sit in the chair that Lurie sat in last year than Robin Wilson-Beattie this year. Robin, okay, yes, clap. Robin, what does this award mean to you, and why does it matter?
This award means an incredible amount of things to me. But primarily what it means is it is giving voice and validation and a platform for recognizing that disabled people have sexual and reproductive healthcare rights, and that that our rights deserve to be protected, and that we deserve to be studied and supported, and there needs to be policy around protecting our rights to reproductive happiness. Or saying reproductive, sorry. Little bit, mixing up all my words. I'm like thinking about reproduction. Okay, but to be honest though, this award it's actually been kind of life-changing for me, because it is, it's actually, not only do I feel like it is validating for recognizing scholarship and research and advocacy and education around disability and sexuality, but also it was validating for me that what I'm doing is making a difference, and that my work is important, that it is needed in this area. And particularly because I was told when I decided to embark on this as a career in 2014, because I noticed that there, I like to look at the intersections of everything. I see where everything is connected. And I saw the connections between disability and sexuality and rights and healthcare and legal issues. And I was going somewhere, I'm trying to go back, but yes, I have ADHD.
It's all good.
But what I was trying to say is I was told that this was impossible, that it was impossible for anyone to listen to what I had to say. It was impossible for me to embark on this as a career, because it was a pipe dream. Well, this award was a dream manifested for me. This has lifted my work, and it has given a platform to the world that I haven't had before. It has lent validity, but also having the recognition of a school of policy, and for the Lurie Institute of Disability Policy, for Brandeis University, having them recognize my work, but not only just recognize, but also the award to fund me continuing to do the work that I do. That has been tremendous, because this work, as crucial and important as it is often people do not want to compensate you for it. They expect you to, basically do this out of the goodness of your heart, to educate people, to do the research, to do that work, or they want to just pay you a tiny bill.
Well, and last time I checked, you can't pay an electric bill with the goodness of your heart.
No, no, exposure does not pay those bills.
You used a term, and I don't know if you did it accidentally or if there's something you're actually thinking there, so I want to give you a chance to flesh it out.
Okay.
You said reproductive happiness. And, I think people have an understanding of, when we talk about what reproductive rights are, what, reproductive health care is, gaining an understanding of the intricacies of reproductive justice as a broader framing that focuses on all issues related to sex, sexuality, health, the right to choose to raise a family or not raise a family, but in a safe space. What is reproductive happiness?
Okay, for me, reproductive happiness is being supported and being in the body that I am, the body that I have now, and a body that has chosen to, reproduce, to have a kid, to have, start a family. But having those rights supported and it being happy is often because, when I say that happiness, it's because I want my doctors and my healthcare, I want the people involved with me to be supportive of my decision, to know about how to give me care, or know how to work with me about giving me the care that I need, recognizing that I have rights. I would love to have happiness around like a birth plan, when you go to a hospital, instead of just a bunch of questions and them bumbling around trying to figure out what it is that they're going to need to do for you. And that was kind of born, I guess, thinking about reproductive happiness, is because my reproductive health experience as a disabled person was not with the exception of the fact that I knew a little thing as somebody was coming, you know, that was the happy part. But the care around my pregnancy, the attitudes around me being pregnant in the first place, being told by multiple physicians and nursing staff that I needed to have an abortion, that I needed to terminate the pregnancy, that I really didn't need to be pregnant. I share this story because of, you know, my experience of being a Black woman actually plays into this. When I was pregnant, I also, it was the same time that I acquired a spinal cord injury. So I had had multiple surgeries in the spinal cord, and the doctor that came to check me in at the rehab center took a look at me, and he just came into the room. I'm here with my husband. He comes into the room, and he doesn't really really greet me, just kind of and he looks at me and he goes, "You knew you were going to be like that," pointing to my disabled body. "Why didn't you use birth control or something?" That was not a happy moment. And that just made me, but that, I mean, not only did it impact me, and I can even remember like just the tone, what his voice sounded like, because that was the moment that I'm like, wait, I have a right to have a child. You don't get to decide to tell me if I should be taking birth control or not. My family planning decisions those are my decisions. I have autonomy over my body, and I have autonomy in my life and as a human being. And that was, you know, that was also an experience in having my reproductive health like dehumanized.
And I don't think you're ever more vulnerable than when you're like on the doctor's table. Because I know when I had my daughter and the anesthesiologist said to my OBGYN, well, while you're down there, why don't you go ahead and tie her tubes? Because folks like her don't need to have more kids. And I looked at my OBGYN and she knew it was either she was going to have to throw him out, or I, even halfway anesthetized because he was really bad at his job, I was going to jump the drape.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and at that moment, like, you're questioning yourself. Yeah. You're questioning the system. You're like, I'm an advocate. I know how to do this. Is my job. I know how to do this. But when you're doing it for yourself in such a position of vulnerability, like, I find myself thinking about what Carrie must have experienced. Yeah. Like in those moments.
And yes, thinking of that, thinking of there, you know, if we're talking about like legal things, I'm thinking of when Justice Kavanaugh, when he was a judge, and there was this case where he upheld a court's decision to force two people that had cognitive disabilities to get an abortion.
They were forced their will and against their knowledge.
Yes. And they were suing, but he upheld it because he was like, oh, people with their, you know, cognitive disability don't have the right to make decisions about their medical care, that they're not capable. And so therefore they don't have the right to do that. But then on the same token, you know, then I'm like listening to, or, you know, reading, go a little bit further and talking about Justice Clarence Thomas, another problematic justice that's there. But he was saying, and looking at like Indiana, saying that, okay, we're not going to permit abortion anymore on the basis of disability. And he actually supported that view and talked about like the eugenics part of it. So, you know, it's been very interesting.
Well, and digging into that, I mean, I think a lot of times, as we've seen in social justice movements, like disability is always the afterthought. It's like, oh, we want to, you know, universal basic income, but crap, we didn't think about people on Medicaid. Oh. Or driverless cars, but what does that mean if you're blind? Like, you know, really being the caboose of the social justice train some days. What can, you know, if we use the framing of reproductive justice, which is obviously much more holistic than solely a rights or health framing, what can the reproductive justice movement learn from the disability justice movement?
Oh, the disability justice movement, you know, talking that one of the key components is basically the talking and the inclusion of the voices of the most marginalized in, you know, positions of leadership and listening and guidance, and also, you know, recognizing and doing work around making sure to that and looking at the fact that identity impacts how you get to navigate the world, and the intersectionality is a key component to how you get healthcare and how you get reproductive care. And so I think of, you know, disability justice should be part of reproductive justice. But reproductive justice has not, you know, that whole afterthought that you're talking about. I have worked in spaces which are feminist healthcare spaces around reproductive rights, but disability was not a part of their programming or even in their purview about what they were thinking about. And to always having to be that voice, and like, what about disability? What about, have you thought of this? And it's just like people, you know, always thinking about it as an afterthought. And it's been kind of, it's been one of those things, and we've seen that with multiple like kinds of movement, looking at like Black Lives Matter, looking at all kinds of different social justice movements, but, you know, the inclusion of disability and realizing that, you know, disability is part of this issue, because disability is just a part of the human condition, and if this is talking about humans, it also is talking about disability. So,
you know, the idea that Carrie Buck wanted to have a child was radical at that point in time. And let's be real, like the topic of disability, sex, sexuality, pleasure is really still seen as taboo almost like a century later.
oh yes.
Why is that?
Well, if you have to say, again, we can go all the way back and talk about puritanical society and patriarchy, and
we're not talking about patriarchy today. We killed patriarchy. Today doesn't exist.
But you know, this whole idea around controlling the sexuality of human beings, who deciding who gets to have sex, what kind of sex you should be having, who gets to engage in what acts with what kind of gender, you know, all this, you know, everybody's really focused on those kind of things, but also keeping it also taboo, keeping sexuality a mystery, keeping your, you know, your reproductive parts a mystery, and, you know, encasing it in this cloud of, you know, basically questions and secrecy. And I feel like when it comes to disabled sexuality, you know, people are thinking, okay, well, this is, you know, this is controversial for, you know, mainstream, you know, society. So, but they're like, disabled people, oh my gosh, they have to think about something else, right? But it's one of those kind of issues. I'm sorry, I am thinking, and as I'm sitting here doing questions in the air.
I want to dig into pleasure. Yes. Because, just as we have conversations in the disability space about sort of the hierarchy between like regular old disabled people and like veterans, or regular poor people and poor disabled people. And like this notion of deserving and undeserving. I find that even like being a thread in conversations around pleasure, like as you're talking about like the policing of who it is you have sex with. We continue to see attempts to like literally like hire people to monitor Facebook, to watch people on Social Security's Facebook pages to be like, did this disabled person take their kid to Disneyland? Like, and so how do we combat that? How, like, what should we collectively be doing as a movement to push back on that advocacy effort to deny us pleasure?
There is, well, the thing is, there's a lot that we need to do in society in general in talking about sexuality and how we talk about sexuality and how we educate about sexuality. Currently in an environment where in several states, like you're teaching abstinence only and things like that in education, that sort of thing, that needs to be eradicated. Sex education, comprehensive sex education needs to be mandatory for all students. And not only, but they are also mandatory to have disability inclusive sex education, meeting people where they are, adapted and accommodated for how they learn, and to teach them about their bodies, their rights, their health, but also pleasure. But we have talking about like the whole puritanical thing where pleasure and enjoyment is seen sort of as a vice. You can't like things too much. And for instance, like one of the 7 deadly sins is lust, and talking about sexuality. So we have to work to combat that. Education to me is a key part of that, but you've got to start young, because that's how because people grow up and and carry those ideas with them and then pass them down. So for me, one of the primary, trying to address that is trying to start from the beginning almost with education, but also teaching that our bodies are designed to give and receive pleasure, and that also in talking about the different ways that we can access that pleasure, and also talking about how changing the conversation about how we define sex. What is sex? Going beyond just defining sex as being something that involves penetrating one's genitals in a way, like this whole heteronormative way of thinking of missionary position or whatever, and inserting a penis into a vagina, and that makes it that sex. When people talk about when saying lose your virginity, and it's like, okay, so what exactly does that mean?
Well, and I think in the disability space, one of the things that I find myself often thinking about is, especially if we're talking about children, like from the time a kid with a disability is born, we tell them, let the doctor move you. Don't be compliant. Like let the if you need someone to clean you, let them clean you. Don't give them a hard time. This is that person's job. If you're in the hospital, listen to the doctors, listen to the nurses. And I find that what we're not doing is equally having the conversation on consent.
No.
And then that, you know, we see compliance as goodness in many ways, or we're trained to internalize that, like, I should be compliant because I should be the nice, compliant, disabled person because this non-disabled person has to deal with me.
Yes.
And then thinking about how does that then play out as children with disabilities get older in their ability to give consent or deny consent.
Yes, that very much plays into that. As a matter of fact, in studying trafficking of disabled people, like there's different ways, you know, of trafficking. You can traffic people, you know, for their benefits, their Social Security benefits. You can traffic people sexually, and, you know, disabled people are trafficked. And something that, and one of the things that when I was researching that is they find that people are more disabled people can be more influenced into being, you know, trafficked because they have been taught from the very beginning to be compliant, to listen to authority, to behave. In order to get to exist in society, then you have to be compliant by those who are seen in authority. And you're not encouraged to question or to express ownership or autonomy over your body, your rights, or your decisions. It's just basically making your body convenient for able-bodied people. I have found that there's like a lot of actions, a lot of the ways of talking, a lot of the ways of how we address, you know, people with disabilities, you know, particularly, like I say, in like medical healthcare, that's it. Is sometimes it's all about what is seen as convenient for able-bodied people. I guess I'm also thinking about people that are disabled that are in guardianship or institutional or other kinds of settings, you know, and how, you know, that's what they're done from the very beginning, is taught to comply and to, yes, respect authority and to do what you're told if you want to be here, if you want to live. Basically.
You're so amazing. I'm actually going to open it up for questions early. Is that okay, Lurie, folks?
Yes, yes. You had one online.
Hi, thank you so much. At the beginning, you mentioned that people with disabilities who are Black and women are like the key people in the movement, and I was wondering if you can explain why you feel that that's has a bigger contribution than other identities.
Yeah, I was about to say, okay. So in talking about, we're talking about like intersectionality, and we're talking about like, so the experiences of, because of, we can talk about history, we can go all the way back.
We can talk about slavery.
Slavery, yes, I was saying, we're gonna talk about slavery. You cannot, in this country, talk about race, Black women, all this, without going back to the history and seeing how all of these attitudes and how laws and all of this, how they have impacted us and how they have been carried on for generations, and how Black women have traditionally been the ones to be the voice of, of what is happening, of what oppression, what, think about even like the elections, it's like once, Black women
save the day.
hey, yeah, and, we're constantly, a lot of times we're looked at because of, like I say, history, as being the ones who are going to clean things up, going to clean it up. But we're not given the authority or the power. We're very marginalized as far as, I mean, and you can even, I've like looked at studies and all kinds of things about like how Black women are perceived and how that translates, to how we're treated into our salaries, how we make, we are like, if you look at all of these things we're talking about, like social tiers of things, Black women, right there.
Black disabled women.
Way down there, yeah. And when you're race, my experience as a Black disabled woman is different than my friend Rebecca here, who is a white disabled woman. I found that when I had to advocate for my decision in my health care, I had a white British husband at that time, and there's no privilege like that. And when whatever I was saying, they didn't listen or seem to respect. He said the same thing, all of a sudden it had authority. And so that's also how I learned about the power of allyship. But, it's recognizing the contributions that Black women have actually had and seeing the things that we are doing. And it's not a favoritism, it's recognition of the work that we have been doing.
It's like the opposite of erasure.
Yes, it's opposite, because we have our efforts and our work has been erased. There have been so many different things. Like for instance, I went to the Period Museum in London. I did not know a Black woman invented the maxi pad.
A Black woman with a disability.
Thank you.
Because she had MS and she couldn't figure out how to use a maxi pad. So she and her twin sister are also, they have the second highest number of patents of Black women in the history of the Patent and Trade Office.
And getting some of her patents were it was like difficult because dealing with white people and didn't want to let her have patent.
I mean, even thinking about the history of ugly laws. Ugly laws were a response to Black people gaining their freedom and moving to the North and the West. So they created statutes that said, if you had any sort of visible condition that made you unsightly, you could be arrested on the spot, which is incidentally what they're doing right now in the New York City subway. And we continue to see, and the last one of its kind was finally repealed in 1974. And those were specific responses to the emancipation of formerly enslaved individuals. I mean, the first mental illness in this country is drapetomania, which is runaway slave syndrome, which was created under the auspices of saying that nobody runs away because they want to be free. They run away because they're mentally ill, and it's on the benevolence of these white landowners that care so much about these people to create police forces, create slave patrols, which are now the modern day police force, to round folks up. And so I think the movement has suffered significantly from the blatant and intentional erasure of Black disabled women.
Of Black disabled women and our end of our work, and how, and also discrediting our thoughts, or taking credit for our work and our thoughts.
And paying.
We have anything else on that?
No, I just said and paying them.
Oh yeah.
We have a question coming in from TJ Gordon online. What are the main things advocates should support now for disabled women presenting folks looking to get married or have multiple life partners or explore the dating pool? What are some examples of adaptive, maybe speed dating events or sites that are disability culture affirming? One of my students has been looking for events like this, and I'm not sure where to direct them.
Okay, well, I can speak to, because doing deep dives and trying to talk to people about dating and online dating and how to avoid being scammed or, potentially trafficked. And there are, there will be sites that have popped up that are supposed to be, inclusive for disabilities, and they end up not existing after a while. They'll be there and then they'll be gone. I've seen like disableddating.com.
We had Date a Little.
Date a Little.
We had Date a Little.
Date
Yes, all the little people remember Date a Little, yes.
Oh, wow. And so it's like your options are, going to, general dating sites, and then going, okay, how do I discuss the fact that I have a disability? How do I talk about that? Back in the day, I had my tenderonies, as I used to call them, but Tinder, but everyone has different ideas about what you can do, what you need to do, but I revealed myself with a disability, visual. I had like visual things that showed that, and I discussed it a little bit in my profile, because I wanted to weed out anyone who was not even remotely interested, and because I've seen where, one time, and I thought I was pretty prominent about like the fact that at that time I was using a cane. But the picture of me with the cane was like maybe the second picture or something. And the dude, we were gonna go out like the next day or whatever, but he was like, oh wait, I looked at your pictures again, and do I see a cane? You have a cane? Oh, I can't deal with that. And so that, and so then I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna make sure this is front and prominent. Because I didn't want to deal with that. I remember I also tried to sign up with a matchmaker no, she sat there and she point blank, she didn't even pretend. She like looked at me and she just didn't even pretend to try to write anything up. She looked at me, she goes, I'm gonna be, she's like called it, I'm gonna just be your friend and give you some good advice, but no, you can't, nobody's gonna want to date you, even if you had a lot of money. She was like, she goes, because nobody wants to date Black women. And she goes, I usually only keep young Black women for like about 6 months with her service. And she goes, but definitely nobody wants, disabled, because I, my walker and stuff. And I was just angry. And I was like, you are wrong. I was like, I am amazing. And I am a great partner. And I was like, I can
Now
and
I'm
will.
like, we need to like find one of our friends who we can set up with a business to be the disabled matchmaker. Because like, let's keep that money in our community.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, but it was just trying to find, what, because it's like, okay, what are my options? Because I knew, I was like,
Yeah.
okay. I went, but then I met my husband the old-fashioned way during a party at the goth vampire group in Atlanta. So
I want to hear that story at some point. I would say on the policy side, because I wanted to touch base on that, right now, if you're a person with a disability and you're on supplemental security income, you're actually prohibited from getting married because you will lose your health insurance. We actually police disabled bodies about their right to marry based on someone's need to access health care. And it's just as in alignment with the fact that right now, if you're on supplemental security income, you can't have more than $2,000 in a bank account, or they take your health care. Right now, there is legislation being proposed that will also actually, for the first time ever, allow people with disabilities to keep their retirement benefits. Because right now, should you eventually need Medicaid, you're not allowed to maintain your retirement. You actually have to spend down your retirement in order to be able to access that. And so we force you to be, we're forcing disabled people to be old maids. Old cranky cripples in the jacked up house on the hill, because we're not gonna let you have a good house.
no,
Yeah,
can't do that.
yeah,
Can't
no.
own property, can't do any of them.
You can have cats. Shout out to the cat people.
But yeah.
There we go. Can we put reproductive happiness on a t-shirt in a Teespring shop and have
We got like
all the proceeds go where the proceeds rightly should go? Because I want to wear that t-shirt
I do too.
everywhere. And I just wanted to ask you, Robin, as someone who is obviously very sex positive and someone who is a disabled person, we're on a college campus and there are a lot of young people probably watching this, some in the audience. And for our young disabled brothers and sisters and non-binary folks who are coming up, what would you say to them as they are thinking about, God, is this even for me? Like, can I even have kids? Is there going to be a romantic life or a sexual life for me? Because I'm not seeing any examples around me. So how do I fit into this equation? What would you say to the young folks?
Okay, one of the things, because I have a young folk in college, and I want, because some of these same questions, they're facing some of these same questions. And my advice has been, join the, like a disabled student union, or they join, a disability, everything, something, and it turns out that unfortunately on their campus, the disabled student group had disbanded, COVID. They killed it, and they haven't, reconvened. And it has been, for me, I've just, I've had to be able, I've been trying to sit there and go and give traditional advice about like, just get out there, just join groups or do things that you are genuinely interested in, and you will eventually meet your person. And I know that, or meet people, maybe not your person, but maybe you might meet your person for right now. I don't know. But, it's just, but, the whole, but also that whole, the getting out there. What does that mean? Are you going to be able to access getting out there? For instance, like my kids' dorm at their college is inaccessible. It is up a big old giant thing of stairs. It's stairs just to even get to like the initial floor. And I was like, how is that? Is that legal for a dorm at a university to be, inaccessible with no elevator? And yeah, it was. I know that that's not like giving the best answer, but I'm just, working with the reality of, I believe in speaking, really about like what's here and now, and that what can change. You can also, I'm trying to, encourage and be the change, talking with kids, it was like, okay, so have you thought about maybe trying to, because if you're, wanting to meet and have community with other disabled students or whatever, have you thought about trying to maybe, be part of that change and reenacting that group, and,
I also think disclosure is
Yes.
important. I am reminded of years ago, I used to serve on the leadership of a group called the National Youth Leadership Network, which was an annual conference for young people with disabilities. I will never forget getting a phone call one night from the front desk. You'll appreciate this. A phone call from the front desk telling me that there's been an emergency with one of our students. And my roommate and I get up, we grab the red binder that's got everyone's health information in it. We're running down. We're like, what room are we in? Oh, it's Sophia's room. Okay, Sophia's room. What's Sophia's disability? Sophia's deaf. Is she on any meds? No, she's not on any meds. Any other things? No. Well, I wonder why the EMTs are there. We get there. They're not working on Sophia. They're working on Brandon, who was another boy at our conference. So I flipped to Brandon's page. Brandon has epilepsy. Brandon's epilepsy is photosensitive. Sophia is deaf in a deaf accessible hotel room. They decided to order room service. So when room service showed up, they rang the doorbell. You know what happens for a deaf accessible hotel room when you ring the doorbell? The lights flash. It gave Brandon a seizure. And so we had a very frank conversation the next morning in morning announcements, where I also learned at the time the Washington, D.C. sign for booty call was 2 taps of the index finger in the palm of your hand and then a phone. And was like, if you are going to date at this conference, if you are going to engage and mingle with other disabled people, that's what this is all about. But it is equally important that you talk about your disabilities and your access needs. So I don't get a call at 2 a.m. telling me 911 has been called over a booty call. So it is possible. I have seen it.
Oh, sorry. Is there another question? Because I felt like this was a perfect ending to this amazing. Okay.
Yeah, now it is, it sounds like.
I was trying to make a joke and the damn but I thought, Rebecca, this ending was perfect. So Robin and Rebecca, thank you so much for this insightful, for this thought-provoking conversation. And Robin, I cannot thank you for the work that you do and for spending the last few minutes. So everyone, please join me. And Robin, as a token of our appreciation, we have is designed by members of the Lurie team, a plaque, awarded for her efforts, which is Robin Wilson-Beattie's efforts to draw national attention to systemic ableism in reproductive health policy. March 7, 2024, and with a photograph. Oh my God.
Oh.
This is my very first award for doing the stuff I do, and
So well deserved.
Brandeis.
Oh, Brandeis goodies. Oh, yay.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
So everyone, we have a reception. Please mingle, please hang out, and we're here. Do what you do best. So thank you.